Hello, I am Baron-Quipity, and welcome to Baron-Quipity, a podcast of quips and tips from a hip librarian gamer. Let's get right to it. Welcome to episode 7 of Baron-Quipity. In the previous episode, I talked about the process of designing your own Brawlhalla fan legend from its initial concept... sorry, I dropped something. Designing your own Brawlhalla fan legend from its initial concept or weapon pairing. This time, I'm going to focus on my favorite aspect of every character, the lore. Not everyone who makes fan characters will make lore, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But some people do. And since lore happens to be my specialty, I decided I would dedicate a whole episode of Baron-Quipity to talking about how you can make good, convincing lore that sounds like it was written by Blue Mammoth Games themselves. So, I'm going to repeat the disclaimer I made in episode 6. Your legend won't be in the game. Just don't expect it. I give a more in-depth explanation of this in the previous episode, but let it suffice here that there are copyright issues and other issues. Just know that the point of creating your own Brawlhalla legend and lore is to have fun and to engage with like-minded people in the community. I should also say that there is no wrong way to create a legend or even to write its lore. It's your creation, after all. Don't let me dictate what you should or shouldn't do. My purpose in this episode, as well as the previous one, is to give suggestions and guidelines to help you make your own quality lore in the Brawlhalla style. Feel free to use or ignore my advice as you see fit. So, to begin, what are the basic steps to creating a legend's lore? I should also mention that this is pretty much all me. I don't know the exact process Blue Mammoth Games goes through to write the lore, but based on my knowledge of the process, and so pretty much all these steps are pretty much made by me and what I would probably do in their situation. So anyway, here are the basic steps that I suggest. Number 1, select an archetype or concept. If you've already designed your legend, chances are you did so with some sort of concept in mind, right? If someone asked you to describe your legend in just a couple of words, this is what I mean by archetype. For example, Ember is the Elf Ranger, Onyx is the Gargoyle, Petra is the Rage Fighter, and so forth. Even if you have a history with this character you've made, even if they're an OC from a fully developed world that you've built for your previous Dungeons & Dragons campaign or whatever, I think you can still explain the general concept behind the character in just a few words. As an example, let's say I have an idea for a canon orb legend, and my concept is librarian. That is the archetype that my character is based on. You should always start with that, your initial concept or archetype. Step number 2, research that concept. So, you've determined what your concept is. Now, research it. Google those words, read Wikipedia articles about those concepts, look up the history or mythology or whatever of that concept. Get acquainted with the context of that idea, because chances are it's been done hundreds or thousands of years ago by someone else, and you can take inspiration from that. I'm not saying you should write a full paper on it or anything. I just mean have fun doing this research. Everything comes from something, and I truly believe that research can and is fun with the proper approach, attitude, and subject. So let's take my librarian example. What might I research for that? Well, I'd be curious if there are any librarians in Norse mythology or in Valhalla. I'd be curious about libraries in the Viking Age or over the ages in different regions of the world. Are there any libraries in any afterlife? Why do we even have libraries in the first place? How did we end up with that current stereotype of the old lady with thin-rimmed glasses and a tight bun shushing people all over the place? Does that even apply today? And who the heck is Dewey for the Dewey Decimal System? All these questions and more can be fun to look up, and all of this can help me think of ways to incorporate a librarian concept in the Brawlhalla style. Step number 3. Look at what BMG does. If you truly want to emulate Blue Mammoth Games' style of lore writing, then the best thing you can do is read all of the lore. If you can, read every legend's lore page at least once each. Then read them all again if you like. One of the main reasons I'm able to do this episode, and the main reason I'm such a lore nerd and also a lore master, is I've read each Legends lore page. Oh dear, how many times? I've lost count, honestly. It's got to be at least 5 times each, right? At the very least. Then again, much of that was for the purpose of making the lore site into what it is today, but anyway, I digress. That's not the point. Don't just read it. Notice the writing style. Notice how and why BMG weaves epicness and silliness all into the same universe somehow. Think about how your concept could fit into that. Now, being the nerd I am, I've taken extra care to look more closely at what might make up the formula of a typical Brawlhalla lore page. I'll explain what I found in a moment, but first, I'll briefly mention what I think the 4th and final step is. Step number 4, write the lore, then let it sit, and then revise. As with any good bit of writing, just do it. Just get your ideas on the page, on the screen, whatever. Write the lore, get your ideas on paper, don't worry about what it's like right now. It will probably suck the first time you write it, whatever. Just write it down, and then step away from it for a while. Come back to it in an hour or a day, and then you'll be in a better spot, your mind will be in a better place to revise it and rewrite it. Rinse and repeat until you feel you can call it done, until you feel proud of what you've made. Now, so now that I've gone over those steps, choose a concept, research that concept, look at what BMG does, and then write the lore. Let's go over what I consider to be the general outline of the quote-unquote formula of a typical page of Brawlhalla lore. So, length. Every single lore page has 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs and has between 150 and 300 words. This is only the stuff after the phrase "as the story goes." So the word count, the 150 to 300 words, does not count the 2 quotes above the main bit of lore. You can tell how much of a nerd I am because I actually I actually made a word count of every single lore page, including Jae-Yun's, by the way, the most recent legend. Here's some fun facts, since I already did the work. The shortest lore is Ada at 155 words, and the longest lore is Yumiko's at exactly 300. Again, not counting the quotes. The general format of the lore proper, again, the 150 to 300 words, is first of all you usually have some sort of introduction, something to kind of like grab the attention of the reader, and then you have some development, and then there's usually like a list or a mention of some accomplishments and achievements, and then you have at the end you talk about life in Valhalla, and there are other lore references sprinkled there where feasible. It kind of feels a little bit like one of those 5-paragraph essay things, right? You have an intro, you have your ideas, and you have a conclusion, right? That's honestly how the Brawlhalla lore is written. Obviously there are some cases where it's a bit different from that, but that's the general idea. That's the general idea I get from that. So every lore page includes a few other things to kind of give added flavor to the character. Every single lore page has some sort of like alternative title for the legend, right? For example, for Jae-Yun, it's the Sellsword. For Azoth, it's One Man Dynasty. For Bryn, it's Chooser of the Slain, Slayer of the Chosen. Think of something like that for your legend, if you'd like. Each page also has 2 quotes above the proper lore information. There's no set formula for these, but they should each demonstrate something about the character. Sometimes the 2 quotes are not related to each other, but other times they are related. Using Jae-Yun as an example, the first quote about his lore comes from a book that recounts a great battle he had, while the second quote is from Jae-Yun himself responding to that account, giving further humorous context for that same incident in his career. Overall, you should make it silly if you want, but certainly make it epic. Even Azoth, the powerful recurring villain in many other points of lore, has some silly moments, especially when the lore talks about his cat, Dander. At this point, I think it'd be good to also I'd like to read a couple of official lore pages of a couple of legends, just to kind of demonstrate what I mean when I talk about this format here. So I'm going to go over Bodvar's lore and Jaehyun's lore. So the first one and the oldest one and the most recent one. So going over Bodvar first. Lore, the unconquered Viking, the Great Bear. That's his alternative title. Now here are the two quotes. I speak, you noble Vikings, of a warrior who surpassed you all. I tell of a great bear man who overcame giants and armies, and of how he came to leave our world and challenge the gods. From the saga of Bodvar Bersin, first stanza. And then the second quote. Listen, ye nine-mothered bear... Okay, let's try that again. Listen, you nine-mothered bridge troll, I'm coming in, and the first beer I'm drinking is the one on your fist. Bodvar to Heimdall, guardian of the gates of Asgard. So you can see that in many cases, the first quote tends to be a bit more serious, while the second one tends to be more casual or just funny. It doesn't always have to be the case, but that's a general that's a general trend that I see. Anyway, as the story goes, born of a Viking mother and bear father, Bodvar grew up feared and mistrusted by his own people. That's the first paragraph. So that's a good introduction to kind of Bodvar's origins. Most legends lore start with the origins. It's a good place to start, but it doesn't have to. Next paragraph. Bodvar's first nemesis was the terrible giant bear Grotnar, his own brother. By defeating Grotnar in a battle that lasted 7 days, Bodvar chose to side with humanity and become the protector of the people of the north. He led his Scandian people against the Witch Queen of Helheim, slew the White Dragon Sorcerer, and lived the life of an all-conquering hero. So there you get a little bit of like development. Bodvar defeated his giant bear brother. He sided with his own people. Like maybe there could have been some sort of like battle for kind of like internal struggle with him for a while between like, am I a bear, am I a man, or whatever, that kind of thing. He chose to side with humanity. And then it kind of lists a few of his accomplishments. Led his Scandian people against the Witch Queen of Helheim. He slew the White Dragon Sorcerer and lived the life of an all-conquering hero. There's a lot of these sort of like lists, like, the legend did this, and this, and this. All right? They can be epic and or silly. Third paragraph. After he single-handedly ended the giant wars by trapping the fire giant king in his own volcano, so again, that's both epic and hilarious, Bodvar sensed his work was done, but he felt doomed to never be taken by the Valkyries to Valhalla because he could never manage to be defeated in battle. So, he traveled to Asgard himself, broke down the doors, and let himself in. And so this is further development of the character and how he got into Valhalla. And the final paragraph says this: Valhalla is everything Bodvar hoped, an endless reward of feasting and fighting with himself among its greatest champions. So that's his life in Valhalla. He just loves this place. He is the quintessential Valhalla fanboy, and he finally made it. So that is Bodvar's lore. And you can see how, and hopefully that kind of gives you a sense for the sort of why I say there's a formula to the lore here. So now let's jump over to Jaehyun, legend number 50, the most recent legend, who was released this past Wednesday. So I'm recording this on July 12th, and he was released on Wednesday, July 8th. So anyway, Jaehyun, lore, the Sellsword. Like I said, that's his alternative title. That's like kind of describes a bit more of who he is. Here are the two quotes. The famed warrior sauntered into the square. He declared that, for the fight to be fair, he would use only a wooden stick. Upon hearing this, the mountain giant lost his nerve and fled. From a book titled Tales of the Sellsword. Or maybe it's a pamphlet, I don't know. It's some text. Now the second quote is from Jaehyun himself. I remember that one. I'd lost my sword and armor playing Tujeon, but I took the job because I needed the money. Lucky break finding that stick. Jaehyun thumbing through a copy. It's just so hilarious, right? Lucky break finding that stick? Why is it lucky that you found a freaking stick? Anyway, but yeah, there you go. Those are the two quotes above his lore. Now, as the story goes, So here's the first of 4 paragraphs. The legendary mercenary Jaeun traveled the seas of the Old Kingdom on the back of his dragon turtle companion Imugi. As a soldier of fortune, he won treasure beyond counting. At least he never counted it before he gambled it away. So there's an introduction to the kind of warrior Jaeun was and is. Legendary mercenary, traveled the seas of the Old Kingdom with his dragon turtle companion Imugi. He's a soldier of fortune. He won riches. He became very, very rich, but he also quickly loses his fortune by gambling. And I think that sets a good precedent and tone for the rest of the lore here. Second paragraph. He earned 3 wishes in one day, rescuing a unicorn lion's soul from the Goblin King, but lost 4 wishes that night playing poker with a fox spirit and had to grant a wish himself. So again, epic and hilarious. He earned 10,000 rubies and a huge magic sword on a job protecting the king from the shadow ninja Jiro, and managed to hang on to the sword. He earned 2 copper an hour delivering barbecue. Work is work. So again, there's epic and silliness in there, and there's references to a couple of legends. Obviously, there's Jiro. There's a reference to a fox spirit, which could be Yumiko, maybe. So sounds like Jaeun traveled from Korea to Japan on occasion. But yeah, he also earned 2 copper coins per hour delivering barbecue. Work is work. Third paragraph, so further development of his character, and also lists of some of his accomplishments. Third paragraph, his most famous task was his epic 5-year quest to help Imugi become a true dragon. His least famous job was the time he lost an eye getting a cat out of a tree. A perfect example of not just listing accomplishments and achievements, but also something epic and something silly. He lost his eye from, I don't know, like a cat scratched his eye, or like I don't know, like a branch scratched his eye. I don't know, whatever. It's just, you'd expect that you know, that wound on his face coming from a battle or something. No, he was getting a cat out of a tree, and that happens. You know, misfortunes just happen like that. In the case of Jaeun, that's hilarious, I think. And the fourth and final paragraph, which talks about his life in Valhalla. Jaeun loves Valhalla, though regrets teaching Fate to play Tujon. In the arena, he loves side bets and bets heavily on himself. The year he won the grand tournament, he put everything on, in the final match, Jaeun will be the first to greet his opponent, and lost a fortune when Kaya was quick and in a good mood that day. So you have mention of Fate and Kaya. Fate because... In the end of Fate's lore, she says she wins big on poker nights because she's an oracle. She's a witch. She can see the future. So she cheats, basically. And so Jaeun regrets teaching Fate how to play Tujon, probably because he keeps losing to her. And then Kaya is just like kind of like this kid personality in a good mood. When is Kaya not in a good mood? I think that's the question. That's a real question, right? So there you go. Those are a couple of official examples of Brawlhalla lore, and as well as demonstrations of sort of the formula. All right. As you write your lore, here are a few questions to think about as you write it. You don't have to answer all of these questions in your actual lore, but you should keep these things in mind. Where did your legend come from? What were their most impressive accomplishments? How did they get their powers / training? How do they get good at fighting? How did they end up in Valhalla? What do they think of Valhalla and the people there? And other legends who are there? What possible relationships or interactions do they have with other legends in Valhalla or before Valhalla? And then also consider, how do they fit in the greater Brawlhalla universe? So to close off this episode of Baron-Quipity, I'd like to share some original examples. I myself have written 3 lore pages for fan legend creations. I'm going to order them in. I'm going to give context and read them to you in order of, like, how do I explain this? In order of how well I think they fit the BMG lore, Brawlhalla lore formula sort of thing. From not as much to the most. So I'm going to start with Dim Flux Scarlet. So I did this. I did this legend on a whim for an amino contest. I didn't win it, but I still feel very proud of this. I made a really, really cool picture. I think it's a cool picture. I made this cool drawing, and then I had my wife colored it because she loved coloring. I wanted to make, so that's all I made. I just made the lore and the image concept. I wanted to make a sort of spooky mechanical Scarlet. So this is kind of like a hybrid between like an actual fan legend and a Scarlet skin, but this is like an actual, I made an actual character out of this Scarlet skin, basically. So I took aspects of steampunk androids as well as Scarlet's bewitching Scarlet skin for Halloween. One of the best skins in the game, I think. Looking back on it, the lore I wrote for Dim Flux Scarlet, it has the appropriate length. It has a good format. I just think I may have been too serious and pretentious in writing it. I guess I had the narrator from Darkest Dungeon, the video game Darkest Dungeon, in my mind, which isn't generally what BMG goes for with Brawlhalla. So I put a lot of epicness and seriousness into this, but not a whole lot of silliness. So anyway, I'll let you be the judge as I read this to you. Dim Flux Scarlet. You may know the story of Scarlet Dashwood's triumph over Baron von Evilstein's vast air armada in a legendary, doubly encompassing campaign. But what if she had failed? In this unfortunate scenario, perhaps surprisingly, the nefarious Baron would not eliminate his daring nemesis. After all, there were ways to make use of such an inventive intellect. With complete control over the world's supply of ether flux, von Evilstein would entrap Miss Dashwood's intelligence into a frail body of metal and glass. However, it would not be enough to simply empower the new creation with ether flux. It had to be controlled. Through a forbidden mixture of scientific and alchemical processes, Baron had developed what he had called dim flux. The murky, tenebrous material flowed through the limbs of his creation, bringing it jerkily to life, while pacifying the typically free-spirited Dashwood genius. For decades, Dim Flux Scarlet served the Baron's will with no hope of escape. However, even a world-renowned scientist had much to learn about the properties of ether flux. The synthetic alchemical bonds in the unnatural concoction decayed very slowly over time, until Scarlet was finally able to take her revenge on Baron von Evilstein and end his notorious reign. How this dark version of Scarlet ended up in Brawlhalla is anyone's guess. Ulgrim won't have anything to do with that abominable automaton, and normal Scarlet just feels awkward around the crepuscular construct, especially when it shows up at the Valhallan Ladies' Book Club. However, quite curiously, Dim Flux can often be seen spending time with Orion, much to the chagrin of many hopeful Valkyries. So, there you go. I just had a lot of fun making a very serious and sort of like maybe a bit spooky and dark version of Scarlet. So now I'm going to move on to the second of three here. I had too much fun with this one, with Baron, my canon orb legend. I went into the details of the skins, the idol and lock-in animations, the signatures, designs, all the weapon skins, all that kind of stuff in episode 6. But here I'm going to talk at length about, somewhat at length about the lore that I made. So, yeah, as you might guess, the concept of this legend was myself, librarian Baron-Quipity in Valhalla. I think this one is a bit closer to your typical BMG lore style, but I'll let you decide for yourself. So, the Lore Master. And here, I even made 2 quotes for this as well. Quote number 1. Baron literally knows everything that has to do with the Brawlhalla universe because he made an entire website for the lore. But he makes bad puns too, so he sucks. That's a quote from Some Jealous Dweeb. It's actually a quote from Schwarpy from his Battle Pass video. I just took it verbatim. I just thought it was too good. But I don't name him in the lore. I just call him Some Jealous Dweeb. Second quote. Contrary to popular belief, I don't know everything. I just know how to find what I need. Baron. Something I have said. As the story goes, Even an ever-expanding universe can be full to the brim with countless planets, realms, and afterlives, as well as hundreds of great, legendary warriors being brought to Valhalla regularly. All of this would be impossible to keep track of, unless you employed a local lore master. No one remembers when Baron took up or was placed in this admittedly niche position in Valhalla. Some say he created his own position for some deeper purpose. Regardless, his bookkeeping and records management work has been a tremendous benefit for Grand Tournament fans who wanted to learn more about their favorite contenders. Such knowledge has even resulted in greater audience reactions when warriors with a history clash in the arena. What else could possibly explain the sudden uproar every time Jalla and Sidra duke it out in a 1v1? Ever since Lin Fei joined Odin's official ranks, however, Baron started to wonder if there could be a way to put himself on the map. One day, Odin was hosting a contest of the mind, a rare occasion indeed. A rare occasion indeed. Highly coveted prizes were promised to those who could demonstrate their quick wit and knowledge. Baron, feeling Odin's questions were far from an adequate challenge for any intellect, hosted his own similar event that proved far more challenging. Once Odin heard of this, he started supplying prizes to support all of Baron's subsequent contests of wit. The rest, as they say, is history. Even before he entered the Grand Tournament himself, he has always been rooting for Scarlet, even though she's certain that he's Von Evilstein in disguise and refuses to let him join her book club. While certainly not the strongest or the fastest fighter in Odin's arsenal, Baron is definitely one of the most knowledgeable, unless Sentinel decides to get a PhD in history or mythology. So yeah, that's the lore that I wrote for Baron. Basically, a lot of it's inspired by what actually happened in real life. BMG had awarded some CCs to people who could answer some lore questions for a back-to-school event. And I thought, that's so easy. Who's the national hero of Batavia? Pfft, Diana. Duh. I know that already. And so I'm just like, you know what? And so I made a comment in there. I'm like, this is too easy, Blue Mammoth Games. Make them harder. And so then BMG themselves, the Brawlhalla Twitter account, DM'd me, privately messaged me and said, you know what? Here are 5 CCs to make your own. Like, I think I'm joked about like making my own. I can come up with harder questions or whatever. And so, yeah, Brawlhalla, they gave me 5 community color codes to give away for my own lore quiz, and that's how my lore quizzes started, and I've been improving them ever since. I eventually became a partner, an official partner after that. So that inspired the lore there. Now the third and final one I'm going to share with you that I wrote is Utao. I am especially proud of the lore I wrote for Utao. So the artist Cyan Petra, or just Cyan, asked me to write some lore for a siren legend. So like sirens from Greek mythology. This is perhaps the best example I have, I think, of taking an archetype or concept, in this case the sirens from Greek mythology, and writing fun lore for that specific concept. So here we go. Unfortunately, I only wrote one quote. I could only think of one so far. Maybe I'll come up with a second quote later. But anyway, here we go. Release the Kraken. Seriously, Utao, stop petting him. It's past his nap time. From Poseidon. That was inspired by one of the quotes from Sidra's lore, where Poseidon tells Sidra, release the Kraken. Seriously, Sidra, you're hurting him. Seriously, let him go. You're hurting him. But in this case, seriously, Utao, stop petting him. It's past his nap time. Maybe the second quote would be something from Utao or whatever. Anyway, as the story goes, all other sirens agree that Utao is the greatest, deadliest singer of them all. However, her life has been a nearly endless stream of impressively strange misfortune. For example, when the Sirens lost a singing contest against the Muses, Utao got the coveted honorable mention. Utao's great skill in song and spear earned her the privilege of guarding the caverns that hold the map to the Kraken's lair, where the priceless Eye of Charybdis is kept under the monster's constant vigil. She even defends with sunken ship cannons as a last resort, so Utao is a spear cannon legend. That all changed when a certain pirate queen showed up to claim the map. For it is said that a siren dies if a mortal hears their song and escapes with their life. Having been warned of the siren threat, the Corsair, knowing siren songs don't affect women, tied up her entire crew after they demanded that they listen to the siren's song. Utao watched in dismay as the ship full of sailors went by without coming any closer to her. The ship came and went with the map, and Utao was forced to fling herself at the ship to take on the entire crew single-handed. Despite her failure to protect the map, a Valkyrie noticed her and led her to Valhalla. Utao is admittedly a bit disappointed that she can't lead anyone to their deaths anymore, but she is certainly making quite a splash in the tournament as well as on stage. She's trying to lure Fate into ditching her band to join a duo act. She also avoids Thatch ever since she overheard him grumbling about getting a divorce, which is especially funny because Thatch claims he's married to the sea, and he wants a divorce with the sea after seeing Utao. Anyway, but yeah, I had too much fun with that, and I feel like that's the lore that I've written that matches closely with the lore style of like that you see in the actual game of Brawlhalla. So yeah, as I've said before, you can take or leave whatever advice I've shared in this episode or the previous episode in making your own Brawlhalla fan legends. The important thing is to have fun. There's no real pressure to make it perfect or incredibly convincing or even very wacky because you're not trying to impress millions of gamers like BMG is. You're just doing it for you. And perhaps your friends and or your followers, whatever the case may be. Just enjoy the journey. And please know that I am always more than happy to give specific tips or feedback on your fan legend if you wish. I also wouldn't mind more opportunities to write some more fan lore. And if, for some strange reason, I am actually able to help write Brawlhalla lore, which I don't see that happening, but that would just be amazing. I feel I am well equipped to be able to contribute to that kind of thing. So yeah, that concludes this episode of Baron-Quipity. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, my friends, make it a great day. All the best.